Hey everyone, Whitney here, and this is episode 4 in my IGTV series called Your Gluten-Free Life. And today I want to talk about why gluten isn't good for anybody. And I know that's kind of a radical statement, but I absolutely believe it, balls to bones. I stand by that statement 100%, and I'm going to tell you why. But before we jump into that, I do want to just take a few minutes and acknowledge that, these are very scary times right now with the coronavirus, and many of us, across the nation, either ourselves or we know someone that is sheltering in place, or maybe they have flu-like symptoms and they're scared, or maybe we're just hunkering down, or looking at, potentially being out of a job. I mean, there's just a lot of scary uncertainty out there right now, and none of us are sure how this is going to unfold, and which adds to the anxiety. And I just want to put it out there because we're all living through this together, but in isolation. It's this very weird, surreal experience, but I firmly believe we're going to get through it. And I do think we need to maintain some semblance of normalcy in any way that we possibly can, no matter how small the rituals are, that give us that sense of normalcy. I think it's important to do that. And certainly for those of us in this gluten-free space, we only have so much wiggle room in terms of what we can eat and drink. We still have to keep ourselves safe due to our health conditions, right? Due to our gluten sensitivity or our celiac disease. So for a lot of us, we have to go about life business as usual when it comes down to, our immediate environment, what we put on our body, what we put in our body, what we allow in our kitchens. We still have to kind of stick to our guns in that way. So even though I thought about postponing this episode and future episodes, I just decided not to, because I still think this information is important, regardless of what else is going on in the world. Okay. So, all right, so let's get into it. Why gluten is bad for everybody. So first, gluten is a very complex protein, and it's just difficult to digest, Actually, to be quite honest, all grains are difficult for us to digest. We really don't have the digestive structure that makes that an easy task, okay? But gluten is particularly hard on the system, and there's a few reasons why. So first, like I said, it's hard to digest. It's this big clunky protein, and it doesn't really break down effectively, so it just kind of like bull in a china shop, knocks around inside of our small intestine, causes a lot of inflammation for everybody, okay? Also, what it does is it has this toxic lectin, which is a protective mechanism for the plant, but it's called wheat germ agglutinin. And what that protein does, what that lectin does, is a couple things. First, it's just very damaging to the cells that line the small intestine, right? So it does a lot of cellular damage, which can set us up for leaky gut, right? Kind of like punching holes in a very thin layer of cells, right? It just does a lot of damage. And so we can get leaky gut just from the presence of that lectin, okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about leaky gut in a sec. Another thing that WGA does is, wheat germ agglutinin, is it mimics insulin. So it will dock in the cell receptor sites that are intended for insulin and really screw up our hormone signaling to the extent where our body is getting messages to store fat and not to burn fat, right? So for those of us who don't want to, store fat, any more fat than absolutely necessary, gluten is not a good idea. Another thing that WGA does is it inhibits the absorption of vitamin D. And vitamin D is super, super important to immune function, right? So particularly in these times, you don't want to be eating shit that is compromising your immune function. And gluten will definitely, absolutely do that in everybody, regardless of whether or not you're sensitive to wheat or gluten, okay? All right, so another thing that gluten does is it increases levels of a particular enzyme called zonulin. And zonulin is an enzyme that regulates what are called tight junctions. These are like these little gates in between that connect all the cells that line the small intestine, right? So you've got cell, and then in between these two cells, there's a little gate, and it's got a, it opens and closes. Well, what opens and closes that gate is called zonulin. And so when we eat gluten, our zonulin levels in the gut increase. And so we get like more hyperregulation of those tight junctions. Unfortunately, zonulin is more prone to keep those tight junctions open, not close them, but open them for things to pass through. So what happens is the more you eat gluten, the leakier your gut is, because all of those gates get kind of stuck in that open position, and then it allows for, bad shit to get directly into the bloodstream. Whether we're talking about, bacteria and viruses and parasites, or toxic chemicals like heavy metals, or just partially digested food proteins that are too large really to be absorbed into the bloodstream, but they get through anyway, and they really piss off the immune system, right? And then maybe the next time you eat that food, you actually have a reaction to it. So gluten can set you up to acquire more and more food sensitivities down the road. Doesn't matter who you are. It does this in everybody, okay? And it's important to note that the most current research out there tells us that up to 1/3 of the population is gluten intolerant to some extent. And maybe even 1 out of every 100 people have celiac disease. So based on those numbers, there are so many people walking around completely undiagnosed, having no clue that they are gluten intolerant or that they have celiac disease, right? And for those folks, all this shit is even worse, right? Because our immune systems are even more prone to just freak the fuck out when exposed to gluten, okay? And I also want to impress upon you guys that leaky gut is no small thing. And it's not something that there's a quick fix for. It can take months, sometimes well over a year, to heal a damaged and leaky gut, particularly for those of us who have celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Leaky gut really sets the stage for us to acquire additional autoimmune diseases down the road, all right? But you know what? It sets the stage for that in everybody. So even if you are not gluten sensitive, even if you eat gluten and all of your, food sensitivity testing comes back totally negative and you're absolutely certain that gluten isn't a problem for you, it still is, okay? Because it creates a leaky gut in everybody. And leaky gut is what sets the stage for additional chronic degenerative diseases down the road, particularly autoimmune disease. So, big takeaway, everybody should be gluten-free. That's just the way it is, okay? I mean, I believe that firmly, 100%. Gluten is bad for everybody. I'm not going to apologize for that opinion. And I'm sure I'm pissing a lot of people off right now, which, actually is okay. You'll weed yourself out and you won't watch me in the future. But for those of you who, I'm preaching to the choir and you absolutely know that what I'm saying is true, just consider this, information that supports you in your efforts to be gluten-free. And hopefully you can take this information out into the world and, help some of your friends and family who might be completely unaware that gluten is totally fucking with their lives. And also, guys, if you're interested in learning how to establish a truly gluten-free house, which I think everyone should do, I do have a free checklist that you can download. So take a look at the post below. I'm going to put a link in there for that. You can always click on my bio link in Instagram too, and you'll find the download at the top fold of my website. Okay, but make sure you get that. It's free. It's pretty simple, and it certainly would be a great resource for most of you, and maybe even for some friends and family. Alrighty, take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.